¿Qué onda, hermanos y hermanas? Bienvenidos al canal, y para mis suscriptores, bienvenidos de nuevo. Hoy vemos algunos videos de TikTok con bromas graciosísimos y hablaremos de lo que podemos aprender. Vamos! Like I talked about in my video on the fastest path to Spanish fluency, when you change the language settings in your phone to Spanish, you're going to be absolutely inundated with vocabulary all over the place. And when you open up an app like TikTok, you're going to get a bunch of hilarious videos that are in your target language, and it's a great way of learning new words. I found a lot of videos on TikTok. I'm going to share just a few of them for you guys. Some of them are puns, and some of them are just jokes in general. But before we get started, I do want to let you guys know there is a lot of vulgarity in these videos. There's a lot of curse words, which I think it is important to learn these words. If we're going to be learning the language, we want to learn how to swear in it. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with that, but just proceed with caution. This is going to be a video more for the adults in the audience, not for the kids, okay? So let's get right into it with our first one.
¿Qué pasaría con tus finanzas personales si dejas de gastar en tonterías durante 60 días? Ni sé ni me interesa. ¡Vámonos!
Okay, so I got three different things I want to talk about real quick before we move on to the next one. The first thing is where he says, ni sé ni me interesa. So he's saying, I don't even know, nor do I care. So what I want to talk about is that word ni. I've talked about this word before, and it is always a negating word. It's always used to turn something into a negative. Now, when he's using it at the start of the sentence, he's saying, I don't even know. So ni can be used to say not even. Or like if you say, no tengo ni idea, you're saying, I have no idea. Now, it can also be used with commands to say not even. So if you're really mad at somebody and you want to be like, don't even look at me, you would say, ni me mires, don't even look at me. But when you're using it for one thing, after another thing, after another thing, it's going to be used to say nor. So he's saying, ni me interesa, which means nor do I care. Ni sé, ni me interesa. I don't even know, nor do I care. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is that word tonterías. And those of you who have already seen my last immersion exercise on the song Oye Mi Amor by Maná, you already know about the word tonto. Again, not to be confused with tanto, which means so much, but tonto, which means foolish or silly or a fool. It can be used as an adjective or it can be used as a noun to just describe the person. Tonterías is an offshoot of that. It's a derivative, which just means foolishness or nonsense or like shenanigans, the kind of things that a silly person would do. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is where he says durante 60 días. Now, like I talked about in my video on por versus para, the word por is used to describe short stretches of time. So if we're talking about a few minutes or hours or maybe a few days or whatever, you would say por. It's fine to say por in those examples. But when we're talking about longer stretches of time, like in this case, he's saying 60 days, 60 días, you have to make sure you use durante. Now, it may seem like I'm just harping on this and it's just this little thing, but guys, this is something that if you say por to talk about like several years or whatever, it's just going to make you sound less fluent in the language. It's going to make you sound like you don't really understand the difference between when to use these two words. So durante is going to be the go-to for talking about long stretches of time, like several months or years or decades. And por is only to be used to talk about short periods of time. Yes, maybe I am griping about these things, maybe I am harping on it, but you didn't subscribe to this channel so that you could just learn the basics. Yeah, I'm going to teach you guys the basics, but you're here to level up your Spanish game, and that is exactly what we're going to do. So, just like the video creator said in this TikTok, vámonos.
Doctor, mire, me he cortado.
¡Necesitamos un curita!
En nombre del Padre, el Hijo y el Espíritu Santo. Amén.
Gracias.
Vaya con el Altísimo.
Oh man, Latinos are so freaking funny. Their humor is just so irreverent and silly, and it just makes me laugh. I love being on Spanish TikTok, I really do. Being bilingual is just so fun. But the first thing I want to talk about here is where he says, me he cortado. Now he's using the verb cortarse, so he's saying, I have cut myself. Now he could say, me corté, which means I cut myself, but he's saying, me he cortado, which means I have cut myself. And like I talked about in my video on the perfect aspect in the conjugation series, when you use the present perfect, you're talking about something where the effects are still being felt in the present moment. So if he had said, me corté, okay, I cut myself, but does it really matter at this point? Is it something that needs to be dealt with? But when you say, me he cortado, you're making it very clear something is still being felt here. It's something that's still relevant in the present moment. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is where he says mire. Now, that comes from the verb mirar. And like I talked about in my last video with the verb oír being used as an affirmative command to say listen, or just to say hey, basically, you can do the same thing with mirar. Now, mirar, meaning to look at when you use it as a command, is another way of getting somebody's attention, but it's not a way of getting their attention to listen to something that you have to say. It's a way of getting their attention to look at something that you want to show them. He's saying mire because he's talking to the doctor. He's referring to the doctor as usted. If you're talking to your friends or whatever, you would say mira. If you're talking to a group of people, you would say miren, because that's going to be the third person plural for that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is that word curita. Now, curita is the word that generally means band-aid, which is what we think he's going to say at first. He's cut his hand, so he needs a band-aid. Okay, that makes sense. And then all of a sudden, this little priest comes out of nowhere. So what's going on with that? Well, cura is a word in Spanish which means priest. He's using the diminutive here to talk about un curita, a little priest. So, of course, you got the little guy who's dressed up like the priest. He's un curita. He's a little priest. Next thing I want to talk about is where he says el altísimo. So alto is the word meaning high or tall. In this case, he's saying altísimo. He's using an exaggerator with that ísimo ending to say the highest one or the most high. Of course, he's talking about God in this case. Whenever you use that ísimo ending, you're using that as a way of exaggerating, of intensifying whatever it is that you're describing. When I say at the end of all of my videos, muchísimas gracias por ver, I'm saying that because I am so dang grateful for every single one of you who tunes into this channel. I just started this channel a few months ago, and every single one of you that tunes in and likes and comments and subscribes, it has such a huge impact. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. Okay, let's move on.
Vecino, una pregunta.
Dime.
¿Esta calle para dónde va?
No, esta calle no va para ningún lado. Usted viene mañana, aquí mismo la encontrará.
Oh man, that is a wise man right there, I'll tell you what. So a couple things here. When he says ningún lado, esta calle no va pa ningún lado. He's saying this street's not going anywhere. So ningún lado is just a way of saying nowhere. Lado usually means side. Like when you say something is al lado de, you're saying it's next to or to the side of. But when you say ningún lado, you're saying nowhere. And ninguna parte is also another way of saying nowhere. Now, if you want to say everywhere, you would just say todos lados or todas partes. So when I'm talking with people about why I learned Spanish, part of the reason why I tell them is because lo oigo por todos lados. I hear it everywhere. Now, the other thing I want to talk about here is where he says aquí mismo. Now, aquí, I've talked about this before, is a way of saying here. When you add that word mismo to it, you're using that to specify right here. It's basically saying this exact spot right here. Now, mismo can be used to add on to a few different words. Like when you say hoy mismo, you're saying today, but it's more like you're saying this very day. It's like today, this very day. Like it's very important that something happens today. You could say ahora mismo, which means right now. Ya mismo also means right now. So that word mismo, which usually means same, you can use it to tack on to a few different words in Spanish to basically specify that, okay, it's this specific point in space or this specific point in time right here. It's just something that really helps with specificity's sake. Okay, let's move on.
Dale, pégale, pégale. No, al balón. No, métesela. No.
Oh boy, that kid is pretty confused, but hey, he's really trying here, isn't he? So a couple things I want to talk about here. Where he says pégale, he's saying hit it. Now, pegar is a really interesting word. It usually means like to stick, to like for something to stick to something or to paste it. You can use it when you're talking about computers, about pasting something into a different spot. You can use pegar. But when you're using it with pégale, you're talking about hit something. Hit him, hit the person, hit the ball. This is why the kid got confused, because he said pégale. So he's like, okay, am I hitting the ball here? Am I hitting the guy? Like, who am I hitting? What am I supposed to be hitting? So the coach tries to help him out a little bit. He says, métasela. Now, meter, I've talked about this word before, is a word very similar to poner, but it's talking about putting something into something else. So the coach is trying to say, put the ball into the net. But the kid got confused. He's saying, well, put something into something else or into somebody else. So he drops his pants. He starts running after the goalie. Oh man, that kid, he's trying. But hey, it's kind of the coach's fault a little bit too, because he said el balón. Now, balón is a masculine word to describe ball. And all of a sudden he's saying métasela, which métasela, okay, I'm assuming he's referring to la pelota, which is another word for a ball, to talk about a ball in sports. But he says métasela. Okay, that la, at least in my mind, it's referring to something very different, which is, well, I'll just go ahead and say it, la verga. I did warn you guys there's going to be curse words in this video. Verga means dick. So he's saying, métasela, the kid is saying, okay, put your dick in. Okay, let's go ahead and move on, all right?
Ahorita vengo.
¿Vas a salir?
Sí.
Con cuidado porque afuera está como a 40 grados.
Okay.
¡Puta madre!
So this might be my second favorite pun video I've got for you guys. My first favorite, you'll see later, and you'll probably understand why right away. But that word grados, it means degrees. And just like in English, how degrees can mean either degrees of temperature or degrees of an angle, well, they're making a joke here. She's saying it's 40 degrees outside. He's like, okay, no worries, I'll be okay. And then he gets outside, and all of a sudden, the whole freaking place is tilted, and he falls over. He says, su puta madre. That phrase, su puta madre, it's very vulgar, so just be very careful with using that. The most literal translation I can think to say would be like, your fucking mother. It's used to say a whole bunch of different things. It can be used to say like, oh fuck, or god damn it, or oh shit, or whatever. It can be used for a lot of different things. It's something that you say like when you're really aggravated, or maybe like when you're really annoyed with something that's going on. But again, it's another really vulgar one, so just be careful with it, okay? Be careful who you say it to. All right, let's move on.
Uy, mi amor, si la belleza fuera un delito, usted estaría en libertad.
Uy, tan lindo.
Chao. Uy, ¿será que no se dio cuenta?
Ok, ya salí. ¡Mira, hijo de puta!
Oh man, she is pissed, and rightly so. I would be too if somebody said that to me in the street. But a few things I want to talk about here. When he says, ¿será que no se dio cuenta? So he's saying, ¿será que? Which he's using the future tense to make a conjecture about something, to ask a question about something that he's not really sure about. So I've talked about this in my future tense conjugation video. Go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. But ¿será que means, will it be that? That's the literal translation, but really it's being used to ask, could it be that? So you can use the future tense in present moments to ask questions as far as making conjectures about something. So if someone knocks on the door and you don't know who it is, you can say, ¿Quién será? Now, when he says no se dio cuenta, he's saying she didn't notice or she didn't realize. So that comes from darse cuenta, which literally means to give oneself account. That's how we say that somebody realizes something in Spanish. It's darse cuenta. No se dio cuenta, she didn't notice or she didn't realize. The last thing I want to talk about here is another really vulgar one. This had me a little bit confused at first, actually, because she's saying piropo, hijo de puta. I thought at first she was saying piropo. Piropo is a word meaning like a flirtatious comment or a cat call or something like that, like a one-line or a pickup line, something like that. She's not saying piropo. She's saying piropo. Now, that is a Colombian slang. I had to look this up because I was a little bit confused on it. Piropo is a Colombian slang, and it's oftentimes followed by hijo de puta. I don't really want to give the exact translation for it because it's just it's a vile word. I really don't like that word. And it's just a really mean thing to talk about someone who's not heterosexual. So she's saying, you gay bastard, you gay son of a bitch. So piropo, just don't get that confused with piropo. Piropo, yeah, okay, it's a cat call or a pickup line. Yeah, you can use that word in those contexts, but just make sure that you use that P sound in between the O's. Don't use that B sound, or you could be saying something that is, again, in my opinion, a very cruel word to say to somebody else. So, okay, let's move on.
Gente, aprendí a usar TikTok. Si te mandaron ese video, sos un homosexual, hijo de puta.
Okay, damn, Grandma. Okay, so really the only thing I wanted to share this for, besides the fact that I think that old people swearing is just the most hilarious thing, is that she's saying sos. Now, sos is a conjugation for ser using vos. Now, if you guys have not seen my conjugation series, vos is something that you're going to use basically as an alternative to tú in various Latin American countries. You need to be prepared to hear it. I think it is definitely important that you're caught up to speed on vos as well as vosotros. That's really the only reason I want to share with you guys, other than the fact that Grandma just called me a gay son of a bitch.
I'm looking for my little sister. I was wondering if we could call her up here.
What's her name?
Last name Halas, like with an H.
Halas?
Halas.
Halas.
Yeah, and first name Mela.
Mela Halas.
Yes, sir.
Attention customers, Mela Halas. The party is waiting for you in electronics. Mela Halas. Electronics.
All right, thank you, bro. I'll just wait for her. Yeah.
Okay, so really the only reason I wanted to share this one with you guys is just to show the benefits of being bilingual and understanding Spanish. If you were in this guy's shoes and you know what me la jalas meant, you would not be saying that over the intercom. You wouldn't be caught lacking like that. So this is part of the reason why we're learning Spanish. It's just, hey, we're having fun with it, guys.
Wakala. What you mean wakala? Wakala. Tan limpias, they're clean. Wakala. They're clean. I washed them. Oh, what color?
Yeah, being bilingual is great, but it does have its drawbacks too. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes when you're having a conversation with somebody, you could be thinking that they're trying to say a word in one language, and it turns out they're using a word in a different language, and you're like, what are they saying? I don't know that word in this language. And they're just throwing in an English word in there. So just be careful when you guys are having conversations with Spanish speakers, because they will oftentimes use English words, and you might get tripped up in the moment being like, I don't know that word. I've never heard it before. And they're just saying an English word. So just be careful, okay?
Pata, pata, pata de pata, patada de pata, papada de papa, papada tapada, tapa de patata. Patada, patada, a papada de patata. Patada de papa, a pata e patada. Patada de pata, a patata empapada. Patada, patada, etapa de patadas. Pata de papa, pata de pata, pam, empatadas.
This is probably my favorite one here, and I don't really have anything to say about it. Just go back and watch it a couple times if you want to learn all the vocabulary. But God, there's so many words in Spanish that they're so similar to each other. They sound very similar, but they mean completely different things. And this is just a great example of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. I got two more for you guys before we wrap up. These are just more on the cutesy side, just to end things on kind of a sweet note. All right, let's go ahead and finish up.
Ay, qué lindo estás, pareces un pingüino, qué elegante. No te pongas celoso. Que no te pongas ¡Oh! Pero bueno, Miki, eso no son modales. Yo no te enseñé eso. ¡Otra vez! Vos tenés mucho pelo. No te puedo poner la manta ahora. Tenés que esperar a que haga más frío. Oh, estás enojado. No te enojes, que yo te quiero igual.
Oh man, that pony's just not having it. So just two things I want to talk about here real quick. Firstly, she's using the verb ponerse. She's saying no te pongas celoso. Ponerse is a reflexive verb, which I've talked about before, meaning to put on or to wear, like to put on your clothes or whatever. But it can also mean to get or to become when you're talking about like a certain state of mind or a certain emotion. So in this case, she's saying no te pongas celoso, or you could say like no te pongas enojado, no te pongas triste. It just means don't get or don't become. And the other thing, again, she's using vos conjugations. You guys are going to come up against vos. Again, it's an alternative to tú in a lot of Latin American countries, and it's just something that you need to be prepared for. It's very similar to tú in a lot of ways, in most ways really, but it is very different in a couple other ways. So just be prepared for it. And if you're not quite up to speed on that, just go check out my conjugation series. That's all you need to do, and you'll be right as rain.
Maxito, saliste, qué bonito. ¿Cómo estás? Qué bonito, Angelito.
Ok, damas y caballeros, eso es todo lo que les tengo para hoy. Muchísimas gracias por ver. Espero que les haya gustado y nos vemos pronto. Chao.